issues and therapeutic games as well. In fact, Chani and I worked together for close to 20 years at Yeshiva Hurtful, and anytime I needed anything, any suggestions for resources, anybody that was working within my department, I would say, go to Chani. She has it. In fact, when Chani left Hurtful, we invested a lot of money to make up for all the things that Chani had that she would lend us when she was there. Well, our loss was Darchei's gain. Chani is now the clinical director of counseling at Darchei, and she also has a private practice in West Hempstead with a satellite in Cedarhurst. And we're thrilled that we will be hearing from her tonight. I ask everybody to put their email address in the chat, because then any materials that Chani is talking about, we will email you a list of them so you will have them. So please put your email addresses in the chat. Thank you. Without any further ado, Chani Nadboy.
Okay. So I thank you very much, Karyn, for, I feel like I'm saying I pay you to say that, but we've worked together for many, many years, and I really appreciate the accolades, and thank you very much. But let's get to the topic. It looks like there are a lot of people who have joined in, and I'm not sure whether to read from that this is a topic that many people deal with or want to learn more about how to do, have specific opinions about or questions about, and I want to save time for us to be able to discuss, the things that people are concerned about and maybe how to address them in your school or whatever environment you're working in. So I prepared just some initial, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes of materials, just kind of as a baseline. I've also emailed to Karyn Feinberg, Dr. Feinberg, some copies of the books. You don't have to write down the books. I've prepared the names and authors of the curriculums, as well as some books that I've pulled out from the library. And I hope that at least begins a framework. And then from there, we'll open it up to questions. Please unmute yourself when you're asking a question, but then keep in mind that whatever you say could be heard by others. So kind of mute yourself if you're not participating in a conversation or there's a lot of background noise. So first of all, welcome everybody. Bullying is really, really a very difficult topic, not just to discuss, but to intervene and really know, what to do with it. So I'm going to start out with a kind of a little history and a little working definition. I was very, very privileged to spend under 20 years, 18 years of my life with Dr. Karyn Feinberg in Yeshiva Hurtful. And one of the gifts of that was that we were privy to have Dr. Rona Novak as a parent of the school. So as she would develop and write certain curriculums, she would kind of try that out in her Torah, her science lab. And she indeed worked for LIJ many years ago and developed and rolled out a bully curriculum that she then implemented in her Torah, as well as many of the Long Island-based public schools. But before her came Dr. Dan Olweis, and I'm sure I am not pronouncing his name correctly. I think the W is a V, out of Norway. And his research began in the 70s. And most of the original research on bullying stems from his research. I'm going to read you his definition as well as his summary, some specifics of what he says. I'll show you some curriculum, some books, and then we'll open things up. So a definition of bullying: a person is bullied when he or she is exposed repeatedly over time to negative actions on the part of one or more other persons, and he or she has difficulty defending himself or herself. The summary is to keep in mind that bullying is when someone is repeatedly and on purpose says or does something mean or hurtful, says or does hurtful or mean things to another person who has a difficult time defending themselves. It's usually aggressive, unwanted, and these are negative actions. Many of the curriculum talk about anti-bullying rules. If you wanted to set something up in a classroom, it might look something like this. We will not bully others. We will try to help students who are bullied. We will try to include students who are left out. If we know that someone is being bullied, we will tell an adult at school and at home. And that's kind of where we begin a discussion about bullying. What we know is there's the bully, there's the victim, and there are the bystanders. Much of the research and interventions revolve around dealing with the kind of differential in power and moving the support of the bystanders from the bully to the victim. But we will discuss that further in a few minutes. I will show you 3 different types of curriculum approaching this topic from 3 different perspectives. The first is the Allwise curriculum, which looks like this. It's a school-based curriculum where you would involve the entire school. It begins with a questionnaire handed out to students and staff members on bullying. You collect all of the answers. The data is then looked at and summarized. And then from there, your intervention is put together as to what the areas maybe in the playground of where bullying occurs, how often, who is being bullied, how is the bullying being done, and then you would have adults appointed to monitor those particular areas. What we do know is that it does necessitate adult intervention. If adults do not intervene, then generally the message is that it is okay to keep doing what you are doing. So adults are really important in this equation. So that's this one. The other curriculum is a teacher's curriculum. This is called Bully Busters. It's a teacher's manual. This one is for grades 6 and 8, and it has specific lesson plans for teachers to implement in the classroom. Now, you could do this as a mental health professional. You can do this as a teacher, but to open up both the discussion and the remediation of bullying behaviors within a classroom. And the third one, which I think is probably the most unique of the 3, is this one. It's called Confronting Bullying. And it is an intervention from a literacy perspective. And it tells the story of a 3rd grade classroom teacher who revamps her entire classroom from a literary perspective, carefully chooses books that relate to bullying behavior, and then uses that curriculum as both reading material, writing material, and an intervention to change the culture in her classroom, where after they might read a book, they might identify who's the bully, who's the victim, who are the bystanders, what do you think could be done about that, so that it becomes a continuous topic of conversation within the classroom. Okay, that's the 3 curriculums that I have. I'll show you just some of the books. All of this, you just put your email in and we will send it to you afterwards. I think my favorite book is this one. If anybody does not have a copy of it, please hurry and go get one. It's called One by Karyn Otashi. What I like about this book is can be simple and can be quite complicated. It can be read on a kindergarten level and can go all the way up to older children with much more complicated lessons. And it's about, and it's numbers. The numbers all have colors to them. It's a very pleasant book. But you could see the red and the blue. The red gets hotter and hotter. The blue gets sadder and sadder. And at the end of the book, which is nice about this, is that the bystanders start to support. Well, one bystander in particular has the courage to stand up to the bully, and then the rest sort of follow. But in the end, they also address the bully and sort of say to the bully, well, you too can join us. And I think sometimes that message is lost. The reality is that many times the bully is also being bullied somewhere in their life, at home, by a sibling, or somewhere else. So don't count out that the bully can't be worked with as well. There are books like this, which are What Do We Do? Bullies Are a Pain, Hot Issues, Cool Choices, it's up to you. What do you do? Some of these are books about asking questions and having the reader choose what to do. And based on that choice, you might turn to a page. Here's another one on Nobody Knew What to Do About Bullying. This is actually a book written by a, Ganit and Adir Levy about what should Danny do, which also is a decision-making thing. There's the famous Julia Cook book called Bully Beans, Juice Box Bully, and that's about it. Okay, the last one is Bully on the Bus. This is another one of those where if you choose one choice, you turn to one page. If you choose a different choice, you go to a different page. And based on whatever choice it is, it tells you what might happen. So it gets one thinking about the choices one makes, whether to walk away or to ignore or to intervene, and how that might play out. Okay. I think I've done enough of the talking. I'd like to now turn things over to all the people that have joined us. I thank you all for making the time to be here. And let's have a discussion about bullying and the questions that you might have, and certainly the ideas that some of you might have. So thank you for listening. Okay.
Can we ask questions now?
Yes, please.
Okay, I have a question that's very relevant. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for doing this. The question is, having a hard time drawing that line, the very fine line between mean behavior, kind of teasing, let's say in a 5th grade classroom, and bullying, really having a hard time drawing the line there. When does it go from mean, or let's say a midos issue of just snappiness or harsh words, to bullying?
So does someone want to answer? If you want me to answer. Okay, I'll jump in and give an answer that I think it's very difficult. And I think sometimes when things are reported, they're not so clear cut. You know, sometimes we have kids that are victimized because they're lacking in a skill, or some of the behaviors that they have may be quite irritating to others. And therefore they might be targeted. I think it's hard sometimes to differentiate sort of what would be acceptable, funny, you know, trying to be noticed behavior from what steps over the line. And I think some of that might be addressed based on who the recipient is and how the recipient feels about it. And if it's consistent, you know, if it happens often toward one particular child, and the child is suffering and unable to defend themselves, then at a minimum, I think it necessitates an adult stepping in and sort of asking the questions of what is going on. Just for clarification, you don't want to ever ask the victim and the bully, or whatever you see as the perpetrator and the person is being done to, you don't want to interview the two of them at the same time. You want to separate them, and you want to kind of get the story. You may also interview some of the other people that are watching. Oftentimes the people that are the bystanders are not real happy about what's going on. And remember, they're hearing it and listening to it and seeing it. And it probably brings up for them, for some of them, fear that if they do step in and they do say something, that they will be the recipient of the same behavior. So they're quiet because they're sort of glad they're not the one on the receiving end. So it takes someone pretty brave to step in and say something. So those are hard calls. You know, I think everybody has to kind of use a little bit of judgment. And if it's not clear cut, it probably still needs some sort of a remediation.
And just to piggyback on that, I think parents very frequently will call us and say, my child's being bullied. It's a trigger word. It's a word that's used a lot. And then when you ask them what happened, it's one other child in the same grade as their child called their child an idiot or a nerd or something like that. And it's very important to try to change the culture from an educational point of view, that not every time a kid is teased, which goes to your question, is it bullying. So I think that I hear it all the time, like my child's being bullied. It's not bullying, there's teasing that goes on that isn't okay, but it's not the same as bullying. Chani, there's a question in the chat. Do all these books have a general basic principle, or are there different systems for dealing with bullies and helping children do so?
They all have sort of different ways of stepping in, but I think what they share is the belief that there needs to be a tremendous amount of tremendous empathy for the victim, and a sensitivity to be taught to the people around about how we treat each other and how we sort of act in sort of a respectful way, one toward another. And I think that they all share the lesson that it's important to treat people with respect and in a specific type of way that's not hurtful, and especially if it's consistent hurtful. I think I want to agree with what Dr. Feinberg said, and that oftentimes any of us who work in schools, we get a lot of calls from parents saying my child's been bullied. And when you scratch the surface, indeed, some of the time there is something to investigate there, but more often than not, bullying has become a word that is often used, but not as often really describes what's going on.
Malky is raising her hand.
Okay.
I'm working in a school, it's the 3rd grade. There is a girl that's sort of been in a power position since preschool. She has a tendency to group kids around her and use that power. She'll say disparaging remarks that don't sound so bad, like she'll say, ugh, you eat chocolate for breakfast? That's disgusting. So like, is that such a terrible thing to say? No, but the way she says it and the way she groups the girls around her, it definitely is a bullying thing. And she pulls other kids, like you're saying, it's a kind of power play. They'll have to be behind her, with her, or against her kind of thing. It's already an embedded, I just started working in the school now. It's an embedded situation. So I'm just wondering, after you have years of this, how do you sort of unseat a person who's been in that position for so long? I really think it's even hard for her. So I have empathy towards her as well, because how does she break this kind of cycle of what she's doing when it's been working for her? And how do you de-seat her after it's been like this for so many years?
So that it's a tough question. These are all really tough questions, because when you have behaviors that have been sort of standard for many, many years, it's hard to sort of change the behavior. Some of the interventions we've done, like both in Hartora, first of all, girls' behavior differs from boys' behavior in this domain. And girls can just kind of roll their eyes, and most of the other girls know exactly what that means. I think with boys, it's less subtle and more obvious if you're looking at it. With girls, it's much more subtle and not so easy to pick up. You know, to pick up the difference between just teasing and really something that is a persistent negative toward a particular student. I think some of the things we've done that have been successful are things where we try hard to change the culture in the classroom, where we're not necessarily targeting either one, the bully or the victim, but we're really targeting the bystanders to talk about treatment and how people treat each other. and how people would like, what changes they'd like to see. We have some curriculums that are like character development curriculums. And so sometimes what we do in like third grade classes is we'll seek to highlight a character trait, or midos or something like that. And we'll come at it from that perspective where you're addressing how people are treated and how they'd like to be treated. And oftentimes you will get the kids talking about things they do or don't like that goes on in the classroom, and you can address it in that way.
So it's more, it's a process rather than something which is going to instantly change. And that's really.
I think so. I think it takes time, and it takes dedication of, the teacher or Rebbe or whoever's in the classroom, along with whoever's doing the intervention. When we've done these things, they've been like, several months, and we'll track it, and we'll go into the classroom once a month and check. And, there may be a prize or an extra recess or something if they have earned XYZ amount of tickets or, kernels of popcorn, then they'll pop the popcorn. So we'll do things like that where we'll try to change the culture and have them earn something along the way so as to learn a different way to interact. Because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to change the culture of that class.
Okay, thank you.
And you're
Sure.
trying to sensitize kids to how others feel. And one of the most powerful things that you implemented and did once in Hurtful, honey, I don't know if you remember.
Oh, I do.
Honey went into a classroom, and she handed out invitations to this wonderful party to half of the class with ice cream and pizza, and only half of the class was invited. I think you actually brought in ice cream and pizza, and then had a conversation process with the class, how the other half felt. And I think if you asked any of those kids in the class, they would still remember that. And I think it changed the culture. But again, I agree with what both of you said, that it's a process. It doesn't happen over time. And I think that things are so much more difficult now, because now it's not handing out invitations. It's seeing, all my friends went on social media, went to the mall, and I wasn't invited. They all went to a ball game. I wasn't invited. Social media, I think, has upped the feeling, but being left out. And I think that's an overarching theme that I've been hearing and seeing in my school as well. Malcolm,
Just to add to what you said, when that intervention was done, first we met with the teacher of the classroom to find out the dynamics of the class. And the kids we invited to the party were half the bystanders and the kids who were typically left out. And the kids who were not invited were the bully and the hardcore perpetrators. And it was amazing to watch, because quite frankly, half of the kids in the class were crying that they weren't invited and they weren't included. And some of the kids who were included didn't want to participate because the bully wasn't invited. So it set up all kinds of very interesting dynamics, but from an experiential level, which was very profound for the kids. I don't think anybody who was in that room ever forgot it. The kids, the teachers, me, anyone of it. But it was a very powerful lesson that the kids really got.
right. Malka has a question. Malka?
Yeah, hi, thank you for this. I have a question more regarding younger kids, and what I find often when I see kids individually, and the mothers can say that the kid is sometimes acting like a bully, though I can't say bully for real, but it's probably stemming from a lack of self-esteem and fear of rejection, which makes the child go and like act stronger or or instigate kids around him. And my question is, how can we obviously have to find help him build his self-esteem, but how do we teach a child like that the sensitivity and the educational part of like, this is taking you to bullying, you know what I'm saying? This is behavior that is not okay, but in a way where the child would be receptive.
It sounds like what you're describing is not really in the category of bullying, but it sounds like there's something going on with the child that they're uncomfortable, kind of uncomfortable in their own skin, or their, emotions, or they're not able to regulate their emotions, or they're not comfortable. There's some other things going on with this child. And that probably needs, I'm not sure this is really bullying behavior, because it sounds like when he gets, triggered, he just gets aggressive, and whoever's around, he'll be aggressive towards. And we get that with younger kids, especially those that are just starting school, or those that maybe, more often in the boys that lag behind their chronological age, maybe their social emotional age is a little bit behind their chronological age, or this is their first school experience, or they tend to be sort of a little tentative to begin with, or they just don't know what to do in the situation. And aggressive, they learn quickly that aggression works to get the toy, to get attention, and I think that needs to be looked at more in depth as to what is the deficit skill, what are the things that the child needs to learn. But that I don't really see as a bullying issue. I see that as an issue with this particular child, to investigate what's going on, and then to intervene to bring the deficit up so that they learn the skill that they need to share, to interact appropriately with other students their age, and to sort of, learn what it is they didn't come in knowing. One of the things that Dr. Feinberg and I have done this for quite a while. I'm not sure that she would agree, but I suspect she would. One of the things that I have found over the last 20, almost 5 years, is that the younger kids are coming in less and less able and capable to be doing the things that we used to think as milestones for their age. And there are all kinds of reasons we can suppose why. Maybe because there are a lot of two-parent working families, they're coming to school younger, all kinds of things. But the bottom line is that it's becoming more and more the school's position to sort of parent these children in places where they haven't come in with the skills that we typically would have thought they would.
Right. So what would be an appropriate, educational like way to educate the child to prevent, because at the moment he is using an aggressive behavior to socialize or to feel validated, which can become a behavior, it can turn him into that. So what would be an appropriate, like, educational way of giving over to a child like that?
I'll tell you what I would do, since it's not standard bullying. Email me at cnadboy@darche.org, or call me at Darche, and we'll talk privately, and I'll give you some ideas.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions in the chat, Chani. Does the dynamic change when the bully victim relationship is boy to girl or girl to boy? And I guess boy to boy or girl to girl, or if it's boy to girl in a co-ed environment?
Does the dynamic change? That's a good question. I think with younger kids, the dynamic is similar. I think as they get older, it gets more complicated. Whether, if you're in a co-ed school, I think what maybe looks to an outsider as bullying may just be acceptable teasing between boys and girls. behavior as they get a little sort of into that those teen years. But
No,
I think,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's
Go ahead.
interesting because I'm in a co-ed school, and any of the bullying that's brought to my attention is either boy to boy or
Yeah.
girl to girl.
Yeah.
Rarely does somebody complain about boy to girl bullying.
right, that's why there's not even like a memory cell in my head of anyone complaining of cross-gender bullying. I don't think it happens too often. Is anybody aware of any situations where that has happened? I'm not. Yeah, I think it's unusual.
Okay. I say, I'll take silence as agreement.
Yeah.
The situation that what you did in this class where you went in with the invitations, how can you re-envision that in a way that's appropriate for an 8th grade class?
I mean, for an 8th grade class, what do you just, if it's boys, you just pass bar mitzvah age. I'm sure they can all relate to having been invited or not been invited to someone's party or some aspect of someone's party. I think you can do it in a similar fashion. But be real careful when you do it because it seems to garnish lots of strong emotion. Among the participants, we did it for a while, and we made those who were invited, like we gave out candy and ice cream, and like we really went over the top with it. And the students who were not invited was just kind of sitting there like really, really unhappy and really upset, and you could see them escalating the longer it went on. So I would just caution how long you do it for. And what your goal is in doing it in terms of what lessons do you want them to learn. The lesson we wanted is just to talk about what it felt like to stand, to be in someone else's shoes or to have that experience. And for the class, and they went out to lunch, they discussed it all day long. So I think you can do it in an 8th grade class. Maybe you make a graduation party.
Okay, I have a question that might be a little bit out there. What do you feel is most important when treating a client who's post-high school and experienced bullying during school years and wants to process it as she feels that she is being held back by that experience?
I have no doubt that there are lots of people out there in their 20s and beyond who have been bullied and continue to struggle with the scars of being bullied. And I think that for someone like that, I probably would look to do some trauma work to kind of unpack what happened to them, to have them understand that they were being victimized. And even though they can't really go back there in real time and undo it, but to really understand on a very deep level that this is terribly unfair, that, if there were an adult who stepped in and helped, and if the person reached out and asked and still wasn't helped, then that is really unfortunate. And I think whoever the therapist is needs to be very, very compassionate, because it certainly has the capacity to hold people back. So to process it and to work through it and to be able to get to a place of understanding it.
I think bullying is something that can last, can be traumatic to somebody like throughout their lives. You hear adults talk about it.
Yes.
So I agree with you. A question, do you work with the victim to empower them when it's not bullying, but it's hurtful?
Yes. I think if you have a victim that is lacking in skills, I might do some assertiveness training where just to have them practice and give them some assertiveness skills, like just how to say no. But not just how to say no, but how to say no and sound like you mean it. You know, with a strong voice, with a facial expression that matches it, with a body language that looks serious and like you really mean it. I would have them practice it. You know, refusal skills. No, you know, if the bully is trying to get them to either give up their snack or give up money or, you know, or something like that, I would have them find ways to either avoid the situation or to have a classmate with them so that they're not alone. And I would definitely strategize to try to empower the victim to explore options that they might not have thought of and practice it when there's nothing going on. So they even practice it in the mirror so that if something happens, they already have a memory card that tells them what to do and they'll be able to access it quicker.
Ahuva has a question.
Sure.
Hi, okay. So this happened to me a few times that a parent would call me up and say that their daughter is being bullied. And like they stressed that it was that the bully was being very sneaky and secretive about it. So nobody else, like no other adults in the classroom were picking up on it. And at the same time, the kid who was being bullied was adamant that they didn't want anyone to actually call out the bully because the bully threatened them. If you tell anyone, or if I get into, you know, and obviously if the bully would get into trouble, it would be obvious that it was because the victim told on them. So how do you navigate that type of situation?
That's a classic situation because kids who bully do it in places where they not likely to get caught. They can be quite, you know, adept at when the teacher's looking the other way, or the teacher walks out of the room, or in a corner of the playground where there's no supervision or nobody could see them. And it doesn't take much. So I don't doubt that it's very possible that what's being reported actually is what's happening. Because that's generally how it happens. It happens in places where they're not going to get caught. So, but in terms, and victims often will say, please don't say anything, please don't tell, it's going to be worse for me. So I think the best thing to try to do is to try to find out from the victim where and when it's happening, and possibly have an adult, a staff member somewhere, so someone just sort of hang out within earshot to be able to hear it or see it. And then you have a way to intervene that protects the victim because you're intervening because you saw it.
Right.
You're calling it out. So this way you don't have to ever say that the victim, you know, you just, I'm the teacher, I see this going on, and I'm going to, you know, intervene and say something about it.
Okay.
Right. I think that's such a good point, because so often I get a call from a parent and this is happening, but my child would kill me if they knew that I was calling you. Don't do anything, but do something. So it's like you feel your hands are tied. When you don't do anything, it doesn't get better. And but you don't want to do anything that's going to be reflect negatively on the kid that's being bullied. Another question, Ms. Nadboy. Not to be obtuse, but are we really saying that children do not inherently know that they should, quote unquote, be nice? Additionally, is there usually something deeper we need to address with the bully individually, or do we focus on the group? Essentially, what makes a bully really want to stop? I think there's a lot of different questions, but I think they're excellent questions.
Excellent questions. Okay, let me see if I can pick them apart. So I believe that bullies are not particularly happy with what they're doing. I believe that deep down that the bully also would like to find a different way to interact. Because if you think about bullying behavior, the group of people who are the bystanders, who the bully is interpreted as his friends, are not really his friends. They're sort of just too scared to be victimized, so they support the bully. Or they do the bully's bidding because they're frightened. That's not friendship. So I think that the bully is somewhat suffering, and I think the victim is somewhat suffering. And I think the bystanders as well are suffering. I think many bullies are being bullied in different parts of their life, and that certainly needs to be investigated. Sometimes it's at home, sometimes it's an older sibling, sometimes it's a parental issue with somewhat very harsh parenting. So that certainly needs to be looked into, that, you know, if the bully is being bullied in a different part, you know, what you have is someone doing this to the bully learns the behavior, and the bully sort of gains mastery by doing this to somebody else. And there you have the progression or the transmission of the behavior to the next generation, which certainly we would like to stop and help the bully find a different way to interact and to, you know, to make friends, real friends, people who want to be with the bully because they're nice, because they behave in a certain manner that is going to attract friendship from others. So I think all of the questions that you asked are excellent questions. And yes, I would work with bullies as well to try to give them skills. I think sometimes the bully has a skill deficit as well in not knowing how to make friends. And then when power works, then they keep using it, you know, kind of reinforces itself. And there's a deficit that hasn't been learned that needs to be taught so that the bully can try that out and make some real friends.
Another question. First, Miss Hollander, are you raising your hand, or is that up from before?
No, I'm raising my hand.
Go for it, please.
Okay, hi. So years ago, for a few years, we implemented in our school the BRAVE program, Rona Novik's anti-bullying program.
Yes.
We kind of tweaked it, and we did a lot of role play. And part of a big chunk of it was addressed towards empowering the victim by role playing with them ways to use humor, ways to act as if, you know, the classic example was someone would go over, a mean kid would go over and say something like, oh, I hate your green striped socks. And we would work with the kids to learn to say things like, oh, today's green striped socks day, you know, to try to turn it into humor. But there were other strategies. If one didn't work, then you worked with them, you know, again, to act as if they didn't care. The last one was to go for help to an adult. But we tried to empower them to do it on their own first, to help them build up their confidence so they could try some of these strategies. And I still use pieces of it when kids come to me and, oh, he said, I can't, you know, and a lot of the things they call bullying, like you said, are really not bullying. You know, they're insensitive comments sometimes. So sometimes it's really just empowering the victim, the person who's hurt. And sometimes that works. You know, if it persists, then you have to work with the bully, with the person who's being hurtful. I don't want to use a label.
I couldn't agree more with you, Mrs. Hollander. And
you can call me Barbara, Mrs. Nadboy.
Barbara, the BRAVE program was wonderful. You know, we used it in Hurtful. Role plays are excellent for having people be able to try to stand in another person's shoes and gain empathy and some understanding about what it might be like to be either the bully or the victim or a bystander, and to be able to discuss those kinds of things. So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to piggyback, I think it's so important to give the child that's being bullied either the language, like, oh, it's Green Socks Day, or not, or nonverbal, like, I'll say, do the eye roll, do the shrug, say, and so, nothing that you have to even think about, but just you say, so, and just practice that with them. And sometimes it just empowers them a little bit, and they don't have to start thinking of a witty comment, but they feel like they have responded in some way.
Right. And another thing we work with is sometimes having them agree with the comment. Pretend it's a compliment. Oh, gee, thanks. And kids tell me that sometimes that works. It takes away the other person's steam sometimes.
It's a great strategy.
Yeah, there's a great book called Simon's Hook, which in it has everything you just said. Is this kid gets a terrible haircut and he goes to school and they make fun of him. And they call him lawnmower head or something like that. But within the book, it basically uses, like fish, to illustrate a point that, like you can walk away, you can swim in a different part of the ocean, you could ignore, you could agree, you can use humor, and it gives a lot of strategies for kids who are the recipients of what they might try out. And we've actually taught kids to do this. And different things work for different kids, different things are their comfort level. So to use humor, to agree with the bully, to all those kinds of strategies, are excellent for victims to try out.
Another question. Do you have any suggestions on how to show being an upstander? Does this fit into the PBIS framework?
All right, good question. We do some PBIS in our school. And I think when you teach respect, responsibility, and safety, I think there certainly is room for being able to teach some of these lessons within PBIS. I'm not sure if that fully answers your questions, but please elaborate if I haven't answered the whole thing.
Well, if they're elaborating, have you found any good framework presentation for teacher training on bullying? There's a decent one on the DOE website, but some of the presentation is not as relevant to Yeshivot. I'm going to jump in before you. Responsive Classroom just had a webinar on bullying that if anybody's interested, I can send them the link, which is interesting, and it's very much teacher-based. But Mrs. Nadboy.
Yeah, I think the Always Bully Prevention Program has teacher training as well. I'm not sure if, Karyn, you might know this. Does Hidden Sparks have stuff on that?
I'm sure they do.
Yes.
You can go into Hidden Sparks website and they have archives of all of their presentations. And my guess is if you look at it, you'll find on bullying.
Mm-hmm.
The organization Madrigos, we had them come to our school a few years ago. They do presentations on bullying, and they're probably on Zoom now.
Okay, I think all these suggestions we'll send out with the resources that we email to everybody. Just a reminder for everybody to put their emails in the chat so that we'll be able to email them any information that has come out of this wonderful, wonderful webinar. TNT, when I say webinar, it's a TNT. Any other questions? Miss Nadboy, yes, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I didn't mean to raise my hand. I was trying to put something in the chat. Sorry, I'm not a tech savvy person, as you may notice.
Okay, Bracha, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about like, let's say in a first grade classroom where let's say, I don't know, I wouldn't call it bullying, but this type of behavior is quite subtle. And I'm thinking about how to teach it to them. So something like a question, they ask questions like, how come you always speak like that in Hebrew? You know, they'll make kind of fun of a girl's accent. And they're smart girls. So when I bring it up to them and teach it to them, they just get smarter and they do it more secretly. So I'm not really changing their behavior. I'm just teaching them that I'm on top of it and they learn, you know, where they can do it. So I really want to help the child. I really want to help the quote unquote bully. I really want to get to her. And in first grade, what's a good way of doing that that can really help shape the child, not just teach them to do it more secretly?
Dr. Feinberg, you want to take this one? I'm sorry, I was trying to put something into the chat.
Oh, that's, and I was writing notes. Can you repeat the question? I'm really sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I really want to help shape the child who's asking these questions in a way that she knows is hurtful to another student. I don't just want her to learn to be more sneaky and do it when a teacher's not looking. What can I really do that will help shape a child in first grade so that, you know, by the time she gets to 8th grade, which is a pattern we see sometimes when it's not addressed, that she's not doing this behavior anymore. You know, she doesn't learn how to do it in a more secretive way.
Can you give an example
Yeah.
of what
Example
you mean?
Yeah, my example before was, let's say she was overheard saying to another student who speaks Israeli, and she was making fun of her accent by asking this question, like, why do you talk with that in that way? Or you sound silly, or, you know, like asking a question like that. Why are you talking like that? Why do you speak with that accent, you know?
So I think as the teacher, you might try to find ways to model the type of response that you might want the student to learn. Or if you happen to hear it, you might ask the child, I mean, I would say reframe, but could you say that in a way that is kinder or softer? Or can you restate that or say that over again in a way that, you know, maybe not as hurtful?
She knows exactly what she's doing. She's a very smart first grader.
Which is exactly why you're calling her out in a very soft way.
Right, but if I'm just telling her, can you rephrase that? She knows how to answer my question. And next time she'll be much more careful to do it when I'm not looking. I'm trying to think of what's a really effective way of helping those kids who are they've just got that in them to tease, to hurt.
Why do you think she's doing it? What do you think is a core of a first grader having it in them to tease or hurt?
I think similar to what you said before, where there could be instances in her life where these types of comments are made to her, and I happen to know that is probably true.
So actually, Barbara Hollander has an excellent suggestion, which is to bring the negative questions to her awareness, which we can agree she knows she's doing, and praise her for positive questions and statements. In other words, maybe take away focusing on the negative, but praise her extra for questions that are positively stated. Might be a way to give the message to her that this is what we want to hear, and that's what we want to tamp down.
So when she's around me, she does that. You know, she's very positive. She makes eye contact with me. It's not internal. It's not, that's what I'm saying. It's not internally changing her. It's just that she's learning where she should do these things so she gets the positive. I really want to try and understand a little bit better how to just help those kids who are hurt and so they take it out on other kids.
I mean, would you consider maybe just sit down and having a talk with her, and maybe there's more going on than
Yeah.
what meets the eye. And, you know, maybe she needs someone to talk to.
Yeah,
who,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, to kind of, maybe there is other stuff going on. And what you're seeing is maybe just like the tip of, you know, the iceberg, and maybe there's other things. And that's how it's coming out, but maybe she would benefit from speaking to someone, you know, if there's someone in the school and having them help her
Yeah.
figure out why she needs to act in this way, and maybe that would help her.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. That resonates. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
I want to point out that Elliot Kaplan, who is the expert and guru on paradox psychology, put in the chat that he has a 3-part video intervention that worked to successfully end sexual bullying. So if anybody's interested in that, they can
Oh, thank you.
definitely look at it. This has been a really wonderful TNT. I think that if there are other TNTs that people are interested in on an as-needed basis, and it comes within Mrs. Nadboy's area of expertise, we will be happy.
It's okay, I'm happy to
consider
give
them.
I'm happy to give it over to somebody else to facilitate as well.
But this is really wonderful, and it came from organically. This is something that people are interested in. We've had over 60 people on this. It really shows that it's an area that is important. As before we started speaking, Mrs. Nadboy was saying how there's been more aggressive behavior in the past little while that she's been seeing in her school. I think we've all been seeing more aggressive behavior, more bullying. So I think there's a conversation that we can definitely continue. I hope you get to look at the resources that we'll be sending out, and Mrs. Nadboy put her email address in the chat. We'll also put it on the resource page. I'll put mine as well. And thank you very, very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Feinberg. Thank you all who participated, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, and thank you, Alice from NEFESH, who
Yes,
puts everything
Of course.
together.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. It was great.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Oh, good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry for being difficult, but that was really helpful. Thanks for nailing it over there.
Okay, you were not difficult, and thank you for, sometimes you need to hear it a few times before you actually, like, you know, hit the right button that's going to be helpful. Because, you know, it's hard in like a sentence or two to understand the situation sometimes. But I'm glad it was helpful.
Thanks. Okay, good night.
You're welcome. Take care. Good night.
Good night.